I'm Tyler Shields. We're at In the Pink in Loulé, Portugal. When I was a kid, I raced motorcycles, and I was a champion at that, and then I skated, and then I was a champion at that. And I'm not trying to say I'm just a champion at everything, but there was never anything in me that wasn't to do something to the fullest. So when I did anything, I did it as if I was gonna be the best ever at it. And obviously with photography, it's not a competition. Right? You are only in competition with yourself. It's only about how much do you want to work. Because I don't do commercial work, right? So everything that I make, I pay for it, I make it, I do it all. So what I love about art is when you race motorcycles, there's a clear winner. You know, you're either first or you're last, in the words of Ricky Bobby, right? But with art, that's not a thing. It is a constant, everyday thing where you're constantly trying to be better than you were the day before. I personally love that because I'm insane and I work 20 hours a day and I just love what I do so much that you have this ability that sports doesn't have, where when you do sports at a high level, you play basically, in the NFL, they play one game a week for a certain amount of time. I can do that every single day. When I was starting all of this, I wanted to make movies. Back then, you needed a lot of money and a massive crew to make movies, but you didn't need that for photography. With photography, you just need a camera and an idea, and that's it. Obviously, you can do big productions, you can do small things, whatever, but you have a camera, you have an idea, and you can make a print of it, and you can have it in galleries. What I did with movies is I figured out how to make movies now how my photographs are done. So very small crews, but very big scale. So that's why we were shooting the movie on IMAX film cameras and VistaVision and Panavision and all these different film cameras. Because when I went to go make the movie, I was like, well, how I do my photography is it's very small amount of people, very old, rare film cameras, and an idea. And so I transitioned that into movies. And in the beginning, it was seemingly impossible to do, but we figured out a way to do it. And the biggest crew we ever had on the movie was 7 people. And that's like helicopters and cars on fire, that was it. Most days we shot the movie, it was just like a photo shoot. It'd be me and maybe one other person, and that's it. There are definitely moments in my life where I've taken photos that have gained a lot of attention. And people have said to me, your life's gonna change after this one photo. But I don't think like that, I don't operate like that. So to me, nothing is gonna change my life because my life is about making the photos. And so once I've made a photo, I'm on to the next. So my favorite photo I've ever taken is the next one. Although there's definitely been some photos that have exploded and I've had to explain things on television, in a fun way. But people ask me what the hardest thing about doing photography is. It's not taking pictures, it's not being in the dark room, it's not making prints, it's none of that. It's can you handle it if you make something that people absolutely hate and they hate you for making it? Can you handle that? And not only can you handle it, but can you keep going and say, I'm just gonna do more of what I want to do? And I've watched that crumble many people, where the first time they get some sort of hate, they just say, okay, never doing that again. I'm insane, and I'm like, oh, okay, people don't like that? Cool, let's go more. A compliment and an insult are the same thing. An insult just takes longer to write. If you make something people don't like it, that's good. Time changes that though. Like I remember when I set the Birkin on fire, people were so angry about it because they didn't know what it was. It was just like, oh, this guy set this thing on fire. Why would he do that? But now people know it's in galleries, it's in museums, it's in books, and that's how I make my living. I was always into the idea of not just doing one series for a whole career, which some people do and it's amazing, right? I wanted to do a series and then something completely different, and then something completely different. And I remember the first time when I was doing The Dirty Side of Glamour, which is, the Birkin on fire and all that type of stuff. The series I did after that was called Suspense, and it was a completely different series and a whole different body of work. And I remember one of my galleries being like, but what about the other stuff? And I was like, this is the new stuff. We're going in this direction now. And then I did underwater after that, and then I did indulgence, and you want to progress. And unfortunately, now we live in such an algorithm time where the algorithm rewards you for doing the same thing over and over again, and when you do something different, it doesn't like it. But I think as an artist, you have to try different things. You can't just do one thing and say, okay, well, that's the thing. You have to be willing to say, I'm gonna do something completely different. Might be shocking to people, but that's the fun of making art, right? You could take pictures of anything. It's just whatever the idea is. Like when I was doing The Dirty Side of Glamour, I would have never taken that image. And then it just, like the silhouettes are very different from that, which are very different from the bathtub, which is different from the Alice in Wonderland, so that's one of the things that I love about photography is like in my lifetime, it would be nearly impossible to make 100 movies, right? Like, I don't know if anybody's ever actually made 100 movies, maybe close, but with photographs, before I'm dead, I will have done 100 different series, and that's awesome. Yeah, the silhouette stuff was fun because I had the idea for it right before the pandemic. So like literally the week of the pandemic, I was doing this big shoot. We built this whole set. I said, all right, after this shoot, I'm gonna start this series. And then the pandemic hits. But because of that, I was able to sit in my house and play with lights. So I started to kind of playing with different lighting techniques. And I remember I had these little figurines. So I was just testing little figurines in my house. Like, okay, because you're emulating the scale, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I was talking to one of my gallerists at the time, and I sent him a picture of one of the figurines. I'm like, this is gonna be a new series. And he thought I was crazy, right? He's like, what, is this a statue? I said, no, there's gonna be people in it once the world opens up again. And so obviously the world opened up again, thankfully. And by that time, I had already practiced the series for a couple months. It was so fun because there was no learning it. As soon as people came in, it was just boom, 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 boom. And then, seeing them printed. Because I was shooting before the lab opened and before we were, the chemicals and we got everything back. So I'd shot, for probably a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then was just waiting, and I had all this film. So then I go into the lab and process everything, start making prints. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a really fun series. And that was when I decided that I wanted to leave the borders in on them, which I thought was such a nice little feeling of that series. I know Avedon and certain people did that, where Avedon would leave the 8x10 borders in, but I just like the idea of like, that's the picture, there's no cropping, nothing done to it. When I started, I didn't know anything about photography. You have to remember, there was no Instagram, nobody had really even websites, right? So if you didn't have a photo book or a magazine, there was no way to see anything. And I was poor when I started, so I definitely didn't have a photo book collection. And it wasn't until later, as I was now, doing galleries and stuff, people would be like, oh, have you seen this Helmut Newton piece or this Irving Penn or Mapplethorpe or whatever it was? And I didn't discover them until I was on the wall next to some of them. Like I didn't see a Mapplethorpe until one of my photos was next to him in someone's house. And same thing with Avedon. The first Avedon I ever saw was the Dovima with elephants. A collector of mine has the biggest print of it ever made. And I remember seeing it in person and I was blown away. And I literally said, what did he shoot this on? And the collector friend of mine was like, oh, he shot everything on the 8x10. And at the time I was getting ready to do the Marie Antoinette series. So I said, all right, I'm gonna shoot all of it on the 8x10. And at that time, nobody was doing 8x10. It pretty much all but died. Film had really slowed down a lot. It's back now in a big way, thankfully. But I think my lab that year processed me for 8x10 and one other person, and that was it. So it was really dying, sadly. But yeah, when I saw that Avedon, I said, okay, I have to do 8x10. Obviously not even similar. I was doing color and these vibrant Marie Antoinette pictures, but I saw that, and then a friend of mine had shown me the Irving Penn Platinum Palladium of Picasso. I remember just seeing that and just the tone of the print. When you see a Platinum Palladium in person, there's just nothing like it. So I was like, okay, I want to try some platinum printing. but obviously in my own way, I want to do it massive. So I found a guy named Matt Beatty, who is one of the best platinum printers in the world. I called him up. He didn't know who I was. I just was a stranger on the phone, and I said, "What's the biggest platinum you've ever done?" He tells me. I said, "What's the biggest platinum that's ever been done?" And he tells me, and I said, "I want to do bigger than that." And he's like laughing, right? And he said, "Well, that's going to be expensive." And I said, "Money is no object. Call me back when you know how much it's going to cost." So he calls me back, and to this day, he still tells me this. He thought I was just going to hang up the moment he called back. He calls me back, he tells me, I said, "All right, let's do it." And then we started making these massive 60-inch platinums. But it's just that step process there where I think if you're not open, right? Like when I saw that 8x10 shot, I could have just been like, well, I do what I do and that's it. I was like, no, there's something to this. When I saw the platinum, I was like, there's something to this. Now we have information like this, right? There's not a lot of videos of those guys talking like this. Maybe on Charlie Rose or, little TV shows or stuff. But now information is so accessible, and I feel like people kind of use it less. To anybody who's curious about collecting dye transfers or platinums or silver gelatins, that's its own unique process. All of those prints are some of the most beautiful prints I've ever seen. And then for photographers, it's the same thing, experiment. Try a different camera, try a different printing process, try a different film stock, and don't be closed off to just this and that's it, because that's how you grow. So film for me is a practical use. I don't trust digital cameras. If I know that I need to get a shot and I know, okay, it has to look like this, I use a film camera. I don't use a digital camera for that. We will use digital cameras for testing, and they're great. There's people make amazing work with digital cameras. There's work in this gallery that was made on digital cameras. Just for me, the process of how I like to shoot is different. So when I shoot on the 8x10, most of the shots that we do of somebody, at the very most, we'll take 4 pictures. But it's a different process. So I'm not just like bam, 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 it's none of that. It's you get somebody set up, and every single little detail and how they move and every little moment of it, it changes the sitter's perspective when you bring that thing out. And I have one that's like a massive, crazy one, and you get something different out of them. Although, I've been shooting film for so long, I shot film through the time when it was dying. And when people were like, "Why are you shooting on film? My cousin has this digital camera that's amazing. You should just use that." Fortunately, now film is back in a massive way. My movie we shot on film. We shot on IMAX, big 15 per film, VistaVision film, normally 8, 16, 35, all kinds of different film. But yeah, with photography, I feel like the eras that I shoot in, the 1960s, 50s, any of those time periods, why not do it on the same thing that they were using back then? The 9 Lips photo in this gallery, that camera is probably 50 years old that I took that on. And it still looks better than most of the cameras they have today. It's funny because for a time when I would talk about film, people would think I was crazy. They're like, "Why? It's expensive and the thing. I mean, realistically, like, man, we get one life and you get one shot at taking pictures, right? So if I'm gonna take the picture, why not do it on what I wanna do it on? I don't care about how much it costs or anything. I never think about that. I think, well, I couldn't have done that on a digital camera. Maybe there's somebody who could, but for me, I just know that camera so well, I can do it blindfolded, and I have. I arrived in Portugal, and I was driving, and I was like, it's just a beautiful country. It actually reminds me of sometimes Florida, sometimes Hawaii. There's just a you're at home type of feeling in this place that's really cool. One moment we're driving and it's just sand, and then the next minute it's these rolling green hills. Then we come here into the city part of it, and I see the gallery, and I'm like, this building is just incredible. Walking in off the cobblestone into here, and then seeing the work in here. All that's amazing, but the people are so nice. Everyone's so friendly here. And, everywhere you go is different, right? Some places, have a really wild energy.